I'm Michael Harrison. Welcome to the second installment of Up Close and Far Out, a series of commentaries and interviews for pop culture aficionados, political junkies, media enthusiasts, fans of science, followers of technology, and of course, the philosophically curious. On this episode, we'll talk about Gen Z and the future of radio. I've been obsessed with radio since I'm a kid. It's been the center point of my rather long career in the media. Our guest is the general manager of one of the most successful and prestigious college radio stations in America, WRHU-FM at Hofstra University on Long Island, New York. The multi-award-winning facility is part of Hofstra's highly respected Lawrence Herbert School of Communication. Its roster of graduates reads like a who's who of greats going back decades in the field of radio. Full disclosure, I'm a proud alumni myself. Our guest left a successful career in New York City radio management, promotions, and programming to become an educator in the field of radio and play a role year after year in the training and inspiring of young, fresh careers in the communications industry. He's one of the field's most astute experts and a man very closely in touch with the feelings and culture of the next generation of radio and television broadcasters. His name is John Mullen. Here we go. Do you see the changes in our society? Because year after year, you have a whole different crop of students coming in. Those of us who are not around young people as much as you are don't often realize that 5 years have gone by, or 7 years have gone by, or even 2 years have gone by since we've last really dealt with and worked with young people.
Well, that's the beauty of transitioning from commercial radio in the 90s and early 2000s to non-commercial, educational, university-based radio, is that I feel like I've been living a focus group with a sample of 6,000 people over the last 20 years. So in the old days, you'd have a broadcast architecture or a Coleman or a research group perceptual study or a format search or, focus groups, and you'd hear from 10, 20, maybe as many as 700. And my viewpoint over 20 years is I've been exposed to thousands of 17 to 25-year-olds primarily. And you can pick up on things. The first thing and most important thing to pick up on is the universal things stayed the same. Young people 17 to 25 have the same hopes, wishes, and dreams as 17 to 25-year-olds from the 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, and 90s. They want to be loved. They want to find love. They want to be happy. They want to be financially successful, secure, whatever you want to call it. They want to have a sense of accomplishment. All those things are universal, and that has not changed over time. Other things have changed over time, but not the basic human needs, the basic human essence, if you will. So it's really important to understand what stayed the same, because as you program radio stations, commercial, non-commercial, web channels, streams, you have to understand that the basic core, what I call the mass appeal draws are the same. I'm a huge fan of relationship shows. Every time I've seen a relationship show on commercial radio, it goes straight to number one. And it's really easy to understand because it's a basic human need. And so, as I look at young people today, I focus on what is the same as years ago. Then we look at the differences. The difference clearly is choice. There is much more choice now. And the scary part is that people are willing to take less production value, less, if you want to use the word quality. People will watch a YouTube video that doesn't really have a beginning, a middle, of an end, doesn't have perfect lighting, doesn't have this, doesn't have that, over network television. That's frightening.
Well, and why is it frightening? Is it frightening from a perspective of those of us who are professionals, who have polished our skills, or is it frightening on a deeper societal level?
Both. What it tells us is, NBC, ABC, CBS television networks, they spend all this time developing scripts, writing stories, beginning, middle, end, production values, making it look real. and, they draw X number of viewers, so on and so forth. And then you watch a YouTube video of a dog, catching a Frisbee, and it's got 1 million views or something like that. And it just says, I'm not really sure. What I'm trying to say is from a standpoint where you're trying to attract an audience and sell them to advertisers like commercial radio or network TV, when your competition is doing less and spending less and getting not similar results, but getting results that take away from your viewership and measurable audience, that's a problem. From the society angle, what it shows you is that people want choice. And what has happened is, this is one of the things that I definitely believe, is that nowadays young people are more trenched into their beliefs than years ago. And the reason is because they can find a place in the streaming world, the social media world, where their exact viewpoint is parroted back to them. And so what happens is people entrench themselves. There isn't everybody watching Walter Cronkite or everybody watching Ted Koppel. Instead, you've got all these niches of people giving their viewpoints, and these students are now going into those viewpoints, and they're much more entrenched than they were years ago. And that's a challenge. That's a big challenge.
And the algorithms of the major platforms, and I consider personally YouTube to be the ultimate platform of all time in terms of power,
right.
and it's just awesome in its detail. But if you look at YouTube as an example, if you're a YouTube viewer, just a regular everyday person, and are not media savvy. You don't know how the industry works, how computers work. You're just a person. You go to YouTube. You will get the impression that everybody in the world is interested in the same things you're interested in. That all of a sudden you'll see the things that are available and the new things that come out are, strangely enough, things that you care about and are interested in, because the algorithms obviously figure out your tastes and play to it. The other services and streaming services do that as well, one degree to another. I mean, we used to have growing up the push buttons on the car, which was this is push buttons on steroids, and
right.
People don't know what they're missing out on. What happens is, and I fall victim to this myself. You fall into this bubble reality that everybody in the world is interested in the strange things that you're interested in. And
exactly.
And I see that as a major problem, not only from a standpoint of, as you pointed out, a mass public, something that binds a nation, binds humanity together.
Correct.
But I also find it a problem being in the business of media, breaking through these tricky algorithms that, big tech in Silicon Valley uses to keep us off balance and keep us in the dark. Do you agree with my assessment?
Absolutely. Right now, if we want to be together as a country, we need to have things in common. And having 3 or 4 or 5 or 6 networks that everybody's watching at least gives you something in common. Okay?
Right.
So I definitely believe that. But see, I believe that commercial radio has some things going for it that could be used to enhance and build upon. The number one thing commercial radio has going for it is live local, ability to react instantaneously. People talk about podcasts. The problem with the podcast is the ones that are well done are pre-recorded. Once something's pre-recorded, the world changes, life changes, stories change, things get updated. Radio has live, local, contests, big money contests, car contests, make me a star contests. Radio has the ability to do those things. American Idol is hugely popular. And the reason it's hugely popular, which is the next thing I'm going to talk about, young people know that they can be the star now. Any young person on social media can become a star, very simply. And in the old days, you would have to get hired by a radio station or a TV station. There were only a handful of them in each market. And you would have to work your way up or be somewhat compelling in some way where you become the star. Nowadays, all you need is a social media account and an idea and decent showmanship and some kind of angle or strategy, and you can become a star. And so the radio can play upon that. I think doing things like WFAN's Fantasy Phenom was one of the best things they ever did, because it drove traffic to a client location for auditions. It got the people engaged. And if you look at every single successful web product, if you look at Facebook, you look at Instagram, you look at cars.com, you look at Zillow, you look at all the dating apps, the key to all of those, Amazon, every single one of those successful platforms, the people who create the platform don't put things on the platform. The end user does. And radio can capitalize on that. AM and FM radio can capitalize on that. More callers. I know it sounds crazy, but the callers are the people fueling the radio station. Give the radio station website to the listeners. Let the listeners, obviously you moderate it and obviously you take off the inappropriate posts, but what I'm trying to say is take a lesson from social media and a lesson from the most successful websites in the world. Give the radio station website to the listeners, because then they'll fuel it with their own content, because they want to be the star. They want to be the star. And that's very important to understand that about the last 10 years of students, or actually 20 years, because Facebook's been around 20 years.
Yeah. I'm thinking back to our conference that we did with WRHU, the talkers did a few weeks ago at the university. And I believe it was Glenn Beck, one of the speakers, I'm sorry, folks, if I'm wrong, who said we're at a point now where our audience has an audience. And
he's 100% right.
And that's a profound concept. Do you think that young people today, and they tell you their dreams and their desires, and some of them, leak out without them realizing they're revealing themselves, would you say they're more obsessed with being famous, or just being famous, than previous generations, before Generation Z?
I think they're more obsessed with it because it's more readily achievable. I do think that there's truth to the statement that young people want to be famous more so than in the past, because they see that it's possible. I really believe that. And it's possible because the technology permits it to be possible. Again, before social media and the internet, you had to work for a television or radio station, or be in a newspaper or a magazine, so on and so forth.
Oh, yeah.
Nowadays, anybody with an idea.
Yeah, you had to get by gatekeepers for everything. If you wanted to be a newspaper writer, if you wanted to be a reporter, you wanted to be a columnist in a newspaper, you had to break through into, and the word was to break into an industry. Once you broke in, you would do whatever that platform wanted because you were so happy to be there. Then you started to struggle to be able to have your own identity. But, I'll do anything to break in. That was the way it was. If you wanted to be in an actor or an actress, they don't use the word actress anymore. If you wanted to be an actor, you had to break into the theater. You wanted to be in television or film, you had to break into that. And radio, you had to break in as well. Now you just have to have a computer. and the technology, I'm noticing ads now on the internet aimed at content creators. Want to make your own videos? One stop. You get license-free music. You get all the tools you need. You'll be able to put yourself in any situation. You'll have any kind of graphics, any kind of music, and you'll be in business. It's like, whoa, that's extraordinary. And it's got to, somewhere in your mind when you see that, you have to say to yourself, are we going to be obsolete here in the education, in the media education business soon, or what?
I'm not so sure about that, because at the end of the day, social media is just like traditional radio, television, and newspaper, which is you attract an audience and you sell the audience to advertisers. So that's the first thing I teach students. Is I teach them the goal here is to attract an audience that you can sell to advertisers. That's the goal, unless you have a political agenda and you're doing it for political reasons, or you're doing it as a hobby. But if you want to be a professional, your goal is to attract an audience and sell them to listeners. And it doesn't have to be the highest audience in terms of numbers. It can be a smaller audience. I'll give you an example. Cricket. Cricket is a sport around the world, very popular. If you do a podcast about cricket, you might not have a lot of listeners in the United States, but you'll have them worldwide. Or cross stitch, or all of these little niche things that you might be better off using strategy and you also want to take a leadership position. The students don't understand strategy and marketing. You always want to own a category. So if you can't be number one in a category, create a new category and self-proclaim that you're number one. And so that's where the students need the education, is they need to learn what the business model is, and they need to understand the strategy, and they need to understand showmanship. Let's take a look at the news. Why does NBC News use graphics? Why are they sitting on the set that looks like the Starship Enterprise? Because part of the news is entertainment, and the students don't understand that. Yes, it's about the stories. Yes, it's about evoking passion that makes the ratings go up, which is why the stories are told in a certain way. But there's also a showmanship element to it, and the students need to be taught showmanship.
What about integrity and ethics? I find that in the quest for clicks and views and likes, clickbait, and all kinds of deception exists out there that would have been considered shameful back in the day. And when I say back in the day, I mean basically up until around 2005, the 20th century and its immediate aftermath. Things are changing now so rapidly. The 21st century feels to all of us like a foreign country, and I don't mean that ethnically. I mean it's the customs. Things are changing. The technology, the language, everything is changing so rapidly that no matter how young or how smart you are, you got to run at a sprint to keep up with it. So I find that there was basically a backbone of ethics and principles that existed in journalism, existed in radio, existed in television, and some of it was written and some of it was unwritten. How do you as an educator, and I know, and I want to just tip the audience off once again that the reason I'm having you on this conversation, on this podcast now, is I highly respect your skills, your background, your accomplishments, and your integrity. So how do you deal with that when the kids may just think that you're quaint? Like, oh, come on, man. Well, nobody does that anymore.
I was very fortunate in the fact that one of my first jobs in the 1980s, I saw a fully functional newsroom at a rock station and a big band station, which was WNEW. So I'm aware of at least a little bit of the journalistic integrity and the deep news departments of the past at music radio stations, which don't exist anymore. Music radio stations nowadays have minimal deep news departments, and I totally get why, and it's not a comment meant to disparage anybody. But the key with ethics is I hired a young lady named Duali Saikai Tao, who comes from National Public Radio, and she is very much into the ethics of stories, making sure that students have original sources, multiple original sources, fact-checking, balance. At WRHU, we try to be middle of the road. We don't try to be either side because we're educational. And quite honestly, we don't know where our students are going to get hired. Some of them get hired at Conservative Talk. Some of them get hired at NPR. More liberal talk. Some end up on television. So we don't really know where our students are going to end up. So we try to go right down the middle because it gives them the most career opportunities when they graduate. And our job is to help them move their careers along. So with the ethics, we definitely stress sources, not plagiarizing. That's a big one. The biggest challenge right now in terms of news and social media is the students understanding that they don't have the right to use a logo of a sports team on their social media, that they really don't have that right. It's a copyrighted logo. You don't have permission to use a Disney still from a movie to promote your podcast about a Disney show. To get them to understand copyright, we spend a lot of time talking about copyright infringement, talking about plagiarism, talking about original sourcing, talking about, words matter. Words matter, especially when it's things that are things like the conflict in Gaza or Ukraine or places like that. Words matter. And we also try to teach the students to listen to all points of view, which I think is an important part of ethics. It's listening to everybody because none of us know everything. And so that's how we approach the ethics and the copyright and all that kind of stuff.
Now, radio is the centerpiece of your department in terms of the radio station, WRHU-FM and WRHU.org, and the website and audio products. But we all know that one cannot be in radio today and not deal in graphics, not deal in print, not deal in video, because there's an overlap between the media.
Correct.
What is your opinion about radio as a platform maintaining its radio-ness while having to go forward into a multimedia environment?
Well, the single most important battle that radio has to face is making sure that AM and FM are free on that car dashboard. By far, that is the most important battle at the moment. And it's really simple. You can't watch something and drive. So the other thing is, about 10 years ago, the university asked me if I wanted to buy an HD transmitter, and I said no. No one has the HD radios. Well, when I say no one, I mean not a lot of people.
Exactly.
Okay. In September, I'm about to buy an HD transmitter. Why?
Things change.
Because it's so easy when you buy a car right now to get HD channels. I just drove up from D.C. I was in D.C. for the July 4th weekend. The whole way back and forth, I was listening to HD radio channels. And so now I've recognized that HD radio is going to have a resurgence. So radio still has the ability, if I work at the post office, if I work on an assembly line, if I drive a cab, if I drive a bus, if there's so many jobs where an audio-only solution is the best solution. Radio provides companionship. My old mentor, Frankie Crocker, used to always say that to me. Radio is for companionship, John. And that's true. And, the people who work the night shifts can listen to live local radio and hear the latest sports store and gossip. And I think that's important. In terms of the television aspect of radio, I look at it a couple of different ways. The first way I look at it is we want to drive traffic to the AM and FM, so that those licenses remain valuable. And the way to do that, I hear many radio stations pushing audience to social media and to streaming. I hear that all the time. Go to the website, check out this. And I get why, because they're measuring it and they're selling it to advertisers. Totally understand that. But there needs to be ways for social media to send audience back to AM and FM, to keep the value high of those licenses. I used the birthday game. The birthday game was a film house product in the, I believe, 90s, that you would put ads on television and you tell people to listen at 7:20 on Thursday morning to hear a birthday, and it would always drive the ratings up because it was taking the huge cume of television and ingesting it into a single focal point during the day at a radio station, so the ratings would go flying through the roof. What is the birthday game for social media? I rarely see content on social media where a station promotes back to the AM and FM. I happen to believe that people who get people meters and people who get diaries are the same kind of people that play Lotto and Mega Millions. I believe that there's a connection between people who play contests and people who accept stuff from Nielsen.
How interesting! How interesting! You're actually talking about a psychographic of people who are prone to enter contests, lotteries, buy the tickets.
Well,
fascinating.
The reason I bring that up is because when I was a program director in New York City, using that philosophy, I was able to make the ratings go up on CD 101.9, which was a jazz station, and Kiss FM. So we know in order to get a Nielsen diary or a Nielsen people meter, you must say yes to telemarketing or direct mail, number one. So the people who say yes to direct mail or telemarketing are the same people that go to Stop and Shop, go to the grocery store, go to the deli, and buy tickets. So this goes back to what does radio have going for it? Contesting. I believe that if you put a contest on social media, if you put on a contest on social media, like the birthday game, doesn't have to be the birthday game, but if you say you can win $10,000 by listening to station XYZ at 7:20 on this morning, whatever day part you want the ratings to go up in, I believe that you can artificially make the ratings go up. Well, why do you want to do that? Well, you want to do that for a couple of reasons. Number one, it gets people in the habit of using AM and FM radio again. Number two, the reason you want to do it is to have more listeners to sell to advertisers. I also believe that I'm a big believer in remotes, and more remotes. I question the need for a studio. If I were a sports talk station, I don't think I'd ever have my host in the studio. I'd give them a Comrex brick, 2 headsets, a crowd mic, and I'd send them to client locations at night, bars, restaurants, sporting events. I'd send them to high schools and junior highs in the middle of the day and colleges, because when young people are exposed to radio, they love it. They love it. But the question is, in junior high, in high school, in elementary school, are radio stations driving the van or the SUV or whatever the vehicle du jour is to these places, right? Are they doing that? No, they're not. But you don't need a studio. Why have the studio? The studio is an expense. It's expensive to have a studio.
Yeah, and it also creates an old-fashioned notion that broadcasters like each other and enjoy being in the same building.
Let's not go there. But the point I'm trying to make is that sometimes we have to look at radio as a political campaign, right?
Oh, yeah.
Candidates go out and they campaign. They go out and they shake hands and they kiss babies and they give their platform. So in the case of radio, if you're a sports talk, one of the most universal subjects in all the world besides love and romance and relationships is sports.
Yeah.
And it's pretty harmless. I mean, people have fandoms, but it's not the same fandom as political talk. It's not as divisive. But the sports world it clears generations. I have a 94-year-old mother. I can still talk about Major League Baseball with her. She knows every player going back 30, 40, 50 years, plus the current ones. So I can always have a conversation with my 94-year-old mother about baseball. And it's the same thing with, you could put your sports station, different schools, different colleges, different bars, and you could, no matter who the audience is, you could talk, in the case of New York, Mets, Yankees, Jets, Giants, Islanders, Rangers, Devils, Knicks, Nets. That's going to always be appealing, whether you're talking to a kid in 5th grade or you're talking to a guy in a bar who's 60. So my point is, but it's getting the station out and about. It's putting the station in a place where people are going to see the station and they feel connected and they feel vested. I think the word that we're looking for is vested. Ownership. In the old days, we'd say you want the listeners to feel ownership of the radio station, right? Mm-hmm. I grew up, one of my favorite stations growing up was WRHU-FM. I felt vested. I felt I knew all the jocks. When they would go places, I would go to the concerts that they promoted. I felt like a part of the family. And I think by getting people out of the studio into locations, that the audience will feel like they're part of the family. They feel vested. They feel a sense of ownership. It's your radio station. It's our radio station. And that's something a podcast doesn't have.
And there you have it. A conversation with John Mullen, the general manager of one of the most respected campus radio stations in America, WRHU-FM at Hofstra University in Hempstead, New York. Hope you enjoyed our second video installment of Up Close and Far Out with Michael Harrison. Thanks for watching. Be sure to like and subscribe if you want to receive future editions of this series and our other videos on the Talkers Media channel. Ring the bell to be notified. Our producer is the brilliant Matthew B. Harrison. Up Close and Far Out with Michael Harrison is a production of Good Phone Communications, presented in association with Talkers Media. Copyright 2024, Good Phone Communications, all rights reserved.